Hey, Dr. Jon Finn here. Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. Right now, you can get my new best-selling book, Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution, at tougherminds.co.uk. The digital book, audiobook, and physical book are all available at a special price that you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, Habit Mechanics. We're going to talk about stress. As ever, if you've got any questions that pop up about the things you're working on or anything else that comes up in the session, just let us know and we'll come back to you. But I'm going to hand over to my colleague and friend, Andrew Whitelam, to introduce what we'll be speaking about.
Yeah, thanks, John. Great to be with you again. Yeah, it's exciting because this is the first of a new series of podcasts from us, which will be throughout this month. And they're going to focus on the subject, as you say, of stress awareness, stress reduction. What is stress? How does it affect us? Why does it occur? Managing stress. And also, we're going to talk about a new solution you have for people which can help them destroy their stress in just 3 days. Already they can find information about that if they go to the Tougher Minds website, tougherminds.co.uk. They'll see information about that at the top of the page. So I know you've released that there, which is really helpful.
Yeah, they can watch a free mini masterclass called Three Secrets to Destroying Your Stress in as little as 2 minutes per day.
Yeah, so we already have that available for people, and in these podcasts we're going to explain more about that. As I say, talk about stress in a lot more detail as well. So John, I know in previous podcasts you've explained how stress occurs. You may want to do that again as we begin this first one, looking ahead to the full month of episodes. But what effect is stress having on us as people? What does it do actually to our brains when it occurs?
Yeah, well, the basic physiology is that when you get stressed, something in your brain called your HPA axis, which is acronymic lingo, if that's a word, in medical terms, for it's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This gets activated and it releases hormones and related neurotransmitters. The most common hormones people are aware of are cortisol and adrenaline, noradrenaline, etc. And that gets your brain primed into what we call a fight, flight, or freeze state. So every area of your brain is taken over by these survival centers. We call those sites in the brain the ape brain, the alive perceived energy brain. They're actually called the limbic regions. There are some special sites in there really connected into this, like the amygdala, which is like a walnut-sized part of your inner brain that's responsible for threat detection. So that's what happens when your brain gets flooded with these hormones, neurotransmitters that are designed to get you into a defensive mode. So
Yeah,
that's kind of summary of what goes on.
yeah, and it's extremely alarming when you drill down into the consequences of that brain physiology, if you like, it that you've just given us. I mean, the reality is, as you've said before, I know, John, that this is what happens inside our brains when we experience stress is literally killing us. In the short term, regrettably, and also in the long term, it leads to degenerative diseases and some physical diseases as well. It's having a huge negative impact on many people's lives.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think what we're saying is hyperbole, if that's the right word. But every day now you pick up a newspaper, you'll see this is absolutely real. You know, it's real. I saw a story on last Friday. It was the front page of the Times headline is dementia cases to double by 2040, driven by poor lifestyles. We've talked about data from the Brookings Institute in the US, recent mental health data in the US. 58 million people, adults in the US, have a mental health diagnosis. We've seen data from the NHS published over the summer, projecting that in the next 15 years, that an additional 39% of the workforce will have diagnosis of long-term illnesses, which include, as like a top 5, anxiety and depression alongside cancer. But these things are all interconnected. So if you've got anxiety and depression, there's going to be higher chances of you developing other diseases like cancer, for example, dementia. We see right now in the UK, the most recent set of data we have, which I would bet my mortgage on is much worse than this right now as we speak, is that there are 2.5 million people signed off on the sick in the UK. That's, remember in the UK, our population is only about 70 million. So if you're a US listener, I think your population is about 400 million. So that's a seismic number of people for the UK. It's a record number of people being signed off on the sick. The cost to the economy in the last 12 months alone of this is an extra 20 billion that taxpayers are having to pay. But what's really interesting is that 1.5 million of those people, either their primary or secondary reason for being signed off on the sick is anxiety and depression. We've never seen this before. We've never seen anything like it before, and it's not getting better. And the thing that worries me is that we have more provision for what we might call mental health support than ever before. So the logical analysis, when you've got a problem that keeps getting bigger and an area that has more provision than ever, and reports that people say, well, I saw a TV show called Gone Fishing, which is a very popular BBC TV show hosted by 2 comedians, and they have men's health as a theme in that, and they often interview experts. And there was a guy who'd set up a fishing charity where you can actually get prescription now from the NHS to go spend time in this charity. They just take people fishing. He's saying, I've had all the medicine, I've had all the therapy, I've had all the mental health support. Nothing was a patch on me just going fishing. Doesn't sound right to me. That's telling us that the mental health support it's really well intended, and I feel bad even saying this, but it's really well intended, but it clearly doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work. And I know why it doesn't work, because it doesn't move people past knowing what they need to do. We can know what we need to do all day long in order to think more effectively and manage stress more effectively, but that doesn't change our behavior. More people are educated than ever before in the Western world about what it's a good idea to be doing in order to live a good lifestyle. Yet the data that was released this time last week shows that the rates of dementia are doubling because people are not living a good lifestyle. So there's something really wrong here. We've got more and more people being diagnosed and struggling, yet more and more provision to help them that isn't working. So there has to be a different way. There has to be a different approach. Otherwise, we're not going to solve the problem. And I genuinely believe we can solve the problem, but we've got to take a different approach to it.
Yeah, of course, as you say, so many of these initiatives have the very, very best of intentions behind them, and sometimes a great deal of resource too. Things like the mental health first aiders we hear about in the workplace. In a workplace context, some organizations and employers you'll hear about will create leisure areas almost, or play areas even, ping pong tables, nice refreshments, things to try to look after their employees' well-being holistically. But certainly doesn't tackle stress and much more besides. So, and I think you're right to raise the point and keep campaigning about it, as it were. And you have a mission, if you like, because people will have seen The Habit Mechanic University and, of course, your best-selling book, The Habit Mechanic. But you want to create certified stress mechanics. You want to empower as many people as possible with the tools to deal with their own stress and the stress of friends, colleagues, and people they know.
Yeah, so for me, the stress is so key in disrupting our health, our happiness, and our performance. They're all interconnected ideas, because fundamentally, if we're overly stressed, our brains are not going to work very well, because the cortisol gets activated. And what a good way to think about our brain, which maybe we'll dig deeper into, it's like a plant, if you, in the sense of it's a living thing, right? And it's encased in the skull, you don't see it, but it's a living biological thing. And when it gets too many of these unhelpful chemicals flooded into it for too long, it stops working properly. It's like poisonous to the fundamental physiology of how your brain functions. So what we've seen time and again is when you equip people with the skills to understand their brain and also to understand how to, in this very specific case, manage their stress, that is the key to actually helping people. So they can take proactive steps every day to de-stress. We can't avoid getting stressed often, but what we can do is be proactive in how we de-stress. So yeah, we've got a program where we train people, and as part of that training, you become a certified stress mechanic. It's probably the cheapest program we've ever made available. She was trying to make it as cheap, as accessible as possible. But I know that when people learning about those ideas, like all of our stuff, it sounds very simple, but it basically revolutionizes how they understand themselves, and revolutionizes how they're able to, I think the best way to think about it is process out the stress and deal with the stress. You know, I think, and I speak to a lot of people about this, I work with a lot of people on this, the main reason why people are not sleeping well is because of stress. The main why people are not eating well is because of reason people are not exercising properly is because of stress. Stress is at the heart of all this. Our brain is being bombarded with stressors, both from the news and the terrible things that we're seeing every day and that we're being exposed to in a much more intense way than we ever were before. You know, people used to sit down and watch the 6 o'clock news, maybe. Now it's like 24/7, you're being bombarded with these images and these sounds and this distressing stuff that's happening. We've also got these transitions going on in our own lives, coming out of the pandemic. Can we afford to pay the mortgage? Are the kids settling back into school? What I call transitions. We've got this constant stream of like hierarchical social information coming at us from social media, making us feel bad about ourselves. Because now, instead of comparing our life to those in our immediate geographical location, like our little tribe or our little village, this is how we've evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. We're now comparing ourselves to everybody else's lives on the planet. It just all creates stress. So if people can become stress mechanics, don't worry about becoming a habit mechanic just yet, but the first step is become a stress mechanic. And we've got an off-the-shelf program that people can use, or they're already using, reporting. I see it in front of my own eyes, because the program we've created is developed on one-to-one coaching. And I see that every time I do those exercises, it's like a light bulb goes off in people's brains. And they get this instant relief of the stress that's been bugging them and worrying for the days or even weeks or even months, just by doing like a 5-minute exercise. So yeah, for me, I think the starting point to start tackling this is we need to equip people with the skills to become stress mechanics. And we've created a toolkit called the Destroy Your Stress in 3 Days toolkit to show you how to do that. If you want to understand what is that toolkit about and why is it different, and also what are the 3 secrets to actually destroying your stress, just go to the website. On the homepage now, just click the button and you can watch that 5-minute mini masterclass where I unpack what stress is, why what we're currently doing isn't working, and what we need to start to do to actually de-stress at the end of the day, at the end of the week, to get our brain working well again.
Yeah, that's tougherminds.co.uk. If you're not familiar with the website, I'm sure many of you are, but as Jon says, go to the website, tougherminds.co.uk, and you will see a button at the top of the page which enables you to watch that mini masterclass and learn those 3 secrets to destroying your stress in as little as 2 minutes per day. Yeah, well, what you say about creating more and more stress mechanics makes perfect sense, Jon, and it's great to hear that there's already positive progress with people embarking on that journey and being successful. Just you said something about the way in which we're bombarded with stress via the media, social media, different channels, different routes in our lives. Just give us an example briefly, if you would. What might happen then? You've spoken about how stress is created when there's a difference between what we expect to happen and what happens when there's a difference. What might happen, for instance, when we see, I don't know, some news about these pretty horrendous, violent military conflicts that are happening in different parts of the world at the moment. What will actually happen inside our heads that will make us stressed?
Yeah, well, the simplest way to think about it is through our lighthouse brain model, which is the simplest. We have 3 core brain models that we teach. They are on a continuum from very simple to this is how it actually happens. But so if we start with the very simple one, which is our lighthouse brain model. So imagine you have a lighthouse in your brain. It's whirling, it's on all the time, essentially. There are 2 characters who live in the lighthouse. One's called Hugh, Hue, which stands for horribly unhelpful emotions. The other character is called Wilhelmina Power or Willpower. Hugh, his main job is to operate the beam of light that's emitted from the lighthouse. And its first instinct is to use that light to scan for threats, worries, or problems. Not just stuff that's happening right now. It can be stuff that has happened in the past. It can be stuff that's might happen in the future. I'll come back in a second and talk about, well, what makes something a threat or a worry or a problem. Its second instinct is to, once there are no threats, worries, or problems, its second instinct is to engage in what we call short-term gratification. So it likes to pay attention to and do things that are easy and give a big reward for not a lot of effort. And the second character, Wilhelmina Power or Willpower, it lives in the lighthouse's library, and it likes to study and learn and focuses on helping you to be at your best. And when you become conscious of a threat or a worry or a problem, it's when Hugh has sent up a message to Willpower, say, hey, we've got a problem here. It could be that thing that happened 2 months ago that shouldn't have happened, and I'm still worried about the consequences of it. It could be, we're going to be late for the train. If we're late for the train, that means we might miss the meeting. And if we miss the meeting, that's going to be a disaster because, or it could be, there's been a really loud bang outside. What is it? What's going on? Could be any of those things but you get this conscious awareness, because most of what we're thinking is just subconscious. It's a habit. But when you become consciously aware of something, it's when Hugh has signaled up to Willpower. And if your brain's working well, willpower is going to be able to come down and coach you and help it to deal with the problem and automate some of how it deals with the problem in the future so that it's better able to do it by itself. That's what we call building implicit emotional regulation habits. But why is a problem or a threat, or a worry or a worry? Very simple. It's because what you expected to happen doesn't happen. You don't expect there to be a loud bang outside. You didn't expect you to be perceived in the way you thought you were being perceived a few months ago when that event happened. You don't expect to be late for a meeting because you pride yourself on being punctual or whatever. So that's all that it is. We could go into more detail on that, but for the sake of this, it's just the disconnection between what you think should be happening versus what's happening. And that's really helpful to understand.
Yeah, it is, and when you put it in those terms, I'm sure more and more people can highlight sources of stress, which in itself is extremely helpful. So thanks for that, Jon. You spoke about the brain living inside us, and I know in the Habit Mechanic book, and as you just mentioned, then the brain is like a battery. And how is that? Why is that important to understand for us when we're wanting to manage and understand and tackle our stress?
Yeah, and what's called, we just go back to what we were talking about, the dislocation of meaning systems.
Yeah.
I unpack that in lots more details within the Destroy Your Stress in 3 Days toolkit. Yeah, so we have a few different metaphors for the brain. One is the battery-like brain. And just very simply, if you're stressed, it's like it's the equivalent of the battery being on all the time. Just think of it as simple terms as that. If that battery's on all the time, it's going to run down. And we obviously break things down into very specific brain states: recharge, medium charge, high charge. So that's one way to think about it. But there is a metaphor we've used in the past. I've actually got some beautiful slides for this that we created for a keynote that I gave. That was featured in the Telegraph at the time, and it's like, your brain is like a plant in metaphorical terms, in the fact that it's a living thing. Things grow on it, things get pruned, and that pruning language that we use for horticulture, actually we use it for the brain as well. We talk about neurons being pruned when we don't use them anymore. So I think most people understand this idea of the soil that a plant is in has a big impact on the health of the plant, as does the weather conditions and the environment that it's in. And essentially, there are optimal conditions for growing a plant and slightly different conditions for growing different plants. But in the same way, there are optimal conditions for your brain to function well in. Now, you can't see what's going on because it's all encased inside a skull. But one of the things we understand, so if we just get this flood, so the stress response is a natural response, absolutely natural. Some people say, I don't get stressed. If you use the dictionary definition of what our stress is, everybody gets stressed. If you don't get stressed, you're not human. It's just a normal thing to happen. You get a disconnection, you get the fight or flight response, which is the first bit of quite a complex process. But, which again, I break down in the Destroy Your Stress in 3 Days toolkit. But the problem with the volume of stress that we're experiencing in the modern world is that once the stress response lasts longer than, say, 3, 5, 10 seconds, it starts to become damaging for the brain. And because of the conditions we're living in, some people are like in these heightened stress responses, in these heightened what we call activation levels, like literally for 24-hour periods. So you can liken that to the soil becoming acidic for the plant, the atmosphere becoming polluted, so the plant can't get the nutrients that it needs. But we can actually see this in like a microbiological level. So if we want to, the simplest thing you can think about, if you want to think about being happy and healthy and high performing, is that So we start with a really simple way, which is a simple metaphor. Is your day is a bit like a barcode. So instead of a black and white barcode, think of a blue and red barcode. The blue times in the 24-hour period are times when you're doing and thinking things that are helpful for you. That includes high quality sleep, managing stress well, sleep, exercising properly, being a great leader, whatever it is, eating properly. The red lines represent times in the day when you're thinking and doing things that are being unhelpful for you, not sleeping, not having good quality sleep, not dealing with stress well, not being focused and productive, being a bad leader, being a bad parent because you're in a bad mood, whatever it is. So, and each of those lines is ultimately, both the red lines and the blue lines, they're like wires in your brain, essentially. You can think of that because they're like habits. Because most of what we think and do is automatic, at least 98%. So you can think of in very simple terms that your brain is made up of wires that are helping you to be at your best, or neurons. So that's what I mean when I say wires, or wires and neurons that are getting in the way of you being at your best. And what we're trying to do to help habit mechanics become better habit mechanics and be at the best more often is to help them to recognize where those red wires are and where the blue wires are, and to get rid of more of this is what you need to do to build better habits, to get rid of more of the red wires. This is what you need to do to build better habits, to build more blue wires. And so being able to get rid of wires, in other words, we can't just rip out wires from our brain. It doesn't work like that. What we can do is we can build new wires that become the dominant wires, that become the dominant automated thinking and doing, automated behavior. So, in sort of a long way around, I'm saying it's really actually, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's really essential if we want to be good at managing stress, and that's fundamentally connected to learning, that we can grow new wires in our brain. So that's key, because I had this experience and my boss shouted at me, or I had a fight in an argument, and my brain is just activating that set of memories and I can't get rid of them. That's all I can pay attention to. So actually, to get rid of them, we need to grow some new wires in our brain, some new neurobiological connections. And in the Destroy Your Stress in 3 Days toolkit, I show you exactly how to do that, because that's how we teach people literally to rewire their brain so they can get better at managing stress, not just today, but into the distant future as well. But so where do wires come from? Well, in our brain, we have these sites called the hippocampus, or the hippocampi, because there's one in each hemisphere. They're the only sites in the human brain that we understand produce new brain cells. And the new brain cell, this is why the plant metaphor is really good, it's like a seed for a new neuron. And what we can see this like under microscopes. When the conditions in the brain are not right, like there's too much cortisol in there, for example, the new brain cells, they won't come out of the hippocampi. They're like, it's almost like they peak and they look and go, I'm not going out there. I don't like those conditions. So this unhelpful volume of stress that we're experiencing, and no one taught us how to process it out properly, is basically creating conditions in our brain, which means new brain cells won't come out. And therefore, we don't have that raw material to actually grow new neurobiological connections, new blue wires with, in our metaphor here. But equally, if, for example, if we're not sleeping properly, eating properly, exercising properly, it damages the hippocampi full stop. And there is we talk about this in the Habit Mechanic book, actually, and there is a video clip that I've played probably thousands of times from a nutrition professor talking to, I think, is it Stephen Nolan? You got a guy?
Oh yes, BBC presenter Stephen Nolan, who yes, I think I know the clip you're referring to was a sort of extended feature he did about his diet and junk food, etc.
there's a professor called Felicia Jacket, and she's talking about some research studies showing that, like, just when males eat junk food for a week, a high intake of junk food in 1 week, they can see the physiological damage to their hippocampi. They shrink, they get smaller. This is real, and we can kind of see this in our muscle biology and our muscle physiology. We can see our muscle getting bigger or smaller. We can feel when a muscle is damaged and there's not the correct blood supply going in there, so it gets a bit sore because the right nutrients are being delivered or being taken away from that area of your body. And when that happens, we stop and we think about, we go to the physio and we get some deep tissue massage and we do some rehab. And we take a bit of medicine, an ibuprofen, but an ibuprofen doesn't solve the problem. It just helps us to go a little bit, to deal with the pain a bit better. And that's all that things like Prozac do. But when it comes to stress and not feeling psychologically great, we just don't have the same understanding of how to solve the problem. Talk therapy doesn't do it. CBT, I'm sorry to say, doesn't do it. I've been my whole degree, 3 degrees that I did, are all based in CBT methodologies. They don't change your behavior. They're not designed to change behavior. They're designed to get you to know what to do to change behavior. So we need a different approach, and that is the habit mechanic approach. But what we've done, what we're doing with the stress mechanic, is we're just going really, really focused on, this is how you deal with stress, first of all. And here's a toolkit you can use just over a 3-day period that will equip you with the skills for life to, like, make a tangible, positive impact on how your brain functions. Which then, once your brain's working well, everything else is easy.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for the way in which you've provided those comparisons, those metaphors, those descriptions. I think they do help people to understand exactly what's happening.
Can I just intervene there? Sorry, Andrew. I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's a really good visual I've seen of this recently. So,
okay.
To any Star Wars fans listening, you don't have to be a Star Wars fan, but Disney obviously bought, well, not obviously, but Disney bought the franchise from George Lucas, and they've started to make other films and TV spin-outs. And in one of the recent spin-outs, I can't remember which one it was, but they actually they're trying to rehab some of the people from the Empire, and they have this machine, and it's like it's like a laser beam into their brain, and it's like it's destroying these
the evil bits.
these wires, these neurobiological connections connected to the memories of the Empire. And I was thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had that technology? But you never know which wire in your brain. Some of the wires are double-edged. There's lots of good stuff in them, but maybe there's some bad stuff, but also there's some good stuff as well. So unfortunately, we don't have that technology, and even if we did, I'm not sure it would work. I think the only way we can do it is manually, by using our intellect as human beings and getting above ourselves and working to rewire using all the tools. And in this case, the Destroy Your Stress in 3 Days toolkit. That's the word. So it's just interesting that science fiction is trying to understands that this is important, but like any change that we want to make, we've got to put some effort in. We've got to put some deliberate, focused effort into doing it.
Thanks for listening to the Habit Mechanic podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell someone else about one of the ideas or insights that you found most interesting.